I'm Sara Denig from Indiana, and I'm one of the OG rock stars. And I'm so excited to have an opportunity to start to host this podcast. I have gotten so much from this podcast, and it's time to give back. So, Christina's here with us. She's going to start taking over, and OG Aaron is with us, big brother who always has our back and always leads us the right way. So, we can't wait to introduce ourselves to you guys and get to know you and add value and give back exactly what we have gotten and why we're where we're at now. Christina.
Hey, I'm Christina Leavenworth. I'm out of Pensacola, Florida. And Real Estate Rockstars was how I learned to realtor. I was working another job and I would memorize everything Pat Hyben would say. It was that long ago. And I thank it for my success today. He interviewed me after I was in real estate for 1 year. I sold 65 homes that first year with a job, with a baby, and just learned so much. And I still listen to the podcast every single week. And the mastermind changed my life, changed my marriage. And just, it's been such a special opportunity getting to know all of you.
I just got chills, ladies. It's fun. It's fun to get to be on here with you. And listeners, this is Aaron Amuchastegui. You've heard my voice before. I'm really excited about bringing Sara and Christina on here today. If you have been around in the last year, you've heard Shelby doing interviews and you've heard me doing interviews. But if you've been around since 2019, you've heard Pat do interviews. You heard me do hundreds and hundreds of interviews. Then there were times when I had to take a break when my daughter was sick and we had other people kind of guest hosting at different times. And so I reached out to these gals really a couple months ago with that idea. I had two things in mind. One, bringing some like fun new energy to the podcast. But two, it was really important to me that the people that I brought on were part of the people that believed in our mission, right? And believed in the mission as a whole of the podcast, of the mastermind, and what we're trying to do. Unlike a lot of podcasts, we're not selling, big, expensive things. We're just trying to go share stuff. And we're not about people coming on to brag about what they've done. We don't let people come on and brag about what they've done. We're here and we're trying to make sure that every agent we interview shares like actionable tips that anybody that's listening can actually go apply next week. Like we just finished an interview where we got these really specific things to like make open houses better. And these really specific ideas of like, it was like joining a regular network group and showing up and doing this. And it's leading to like 4 or 5 new deals a year. So our mission is that every time we do a podcast interview, that our listeners can come out of it with something actionable to do. Again, we don't want people bragging. We don't want them selling stuff. We want them teaching you guys what to do. And then the only thing that we ever sell tickets to is our mastermind out in March in Austin. But I lose a ton of money on that mastermind every year. The reason that I do it is a fun passion project. And my life got changed by attending these big, expensive masterminds. I got access to these big, expensive speakers, but it was so life-changing for me. I wanted to bring that same thing to our podcast listenership. And so that's the other kind of side of the mission of why I wanted to invite Christina and Sara out to be the new hosts along with me. So sometimes I'll be hosting, sometimes either of them will be hosting, sometimes some of us will be doing it together. Me with either of the gals or the two ladies together as they're interviewing people, because they've been here since the beginning of our mastermind. And it was really fun when I first got to meet them. So Christina, when did you start listening to the Real Estate Rockstars podcast? Was it like 2017?
It was 2017. I was working full-time as a news anchor and reporter for a TV station, and I had crazy hours. So my brokerage was like, you can't be a part-time realtor. I was like, challenge accepted. I'll do full-time news and then full-time real estate. And so between news shots, I would just listen to Pat Hyben. Sometimes I would go in the news vehicle to open doors and memorize what he said as I went on a listing appointment. And because that was all I could do. I didn't have time to go to brokerage training. I didn't have time to go to real estate school doing it online. And it was just phenomenal. And when you did the mastermind in 2021, right?
Yeah, 2021 was the first time we did it.
So I heard it and
much.
it was just a no-brainer. It was like, I have to go to this. And my husband was like, oh, like, I don't really want you going alone. You don't know anybody. And he doesn't even do real estate. So I was like, come on. Like, they talk about other things, not just real estate. They talk about investing, just being a better person. And he got hooked and it changed his life. He's now in GoBundance with you. And it's just so crazy how one decision or even just one listening, there's so many podcasts you can choose from. And I was like, I like this green looking one and choosing that podcast. And then here I am talking to you guys today. It's crazy how life works.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember meeting you and meeting your husband. And I remember when you came out to the first event in 2021, you had mentioned that. You had mentioned that didn't Pat interview you? So Pat interviewed you after your first year. So even when you had come out and I met you in 2021, you were like, I've actually been, because we do the whole thing. How'd you get here? How'd you hear about us? And you're like, I was actually interviewed on the podcast by Pat. There were some people that showed up to the first mastermind expecting to meet Pat, expecting to see Pat. I remember Bill was so upset. He's like, I came here to see Pat Hyben. Who the F is this Aaron guy? Like he almost left, like so angry that very first day. And he ended up sticking around. And he's one of our OG members that has not missed a mastermind since. And and so the first time you came out, you told me that story of, that you were on that podcast before, that you had heard of Pat and come to be a part of it. And it was awesome getting to meet your husband. And yeah, and since we've become great friends, he ended up joining the GoBundance Mastermind as well. And again, with the whole idea was we wanted to, it's like two different things. We take what we do in the podcast and we bring it in real life. We bring people to come speak. And then you got to speak. I think, did you speak at the Driscoll 2 years ago? Was that the first time you spoke, or did you speak last year at the Proper?
So I helped you guys MC at the Proper, and then I spoke at the Driscoll, which was really cool. And when Pat wanted to interview me, I was geeking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, like the God of real estate wants to talk to me. And it was just such a cool experience to be able to give back with things that I learned from the podcast, how I was able to implement it. And taking that back to our own community as well. I think that is the beauty of this podcast, is an abundance mindset. There are no secrets. Before we started recording, that's what Sara said. We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're talking to people. We're building relationships. It's just little tips and nuggets on how to maybe do it better or more efficiently, that no one's going to steal anything from you. There's more than enough business to go around.
Yeah, tons of business. And you even bring extra guests to the mastermind every year as you come. And I remember when you spoke at the Driscoll 2 years ago, you showed the very first news anchor videos of you being a newscaster, and then how you were now. And it was such a funny speech, because you were like, here's my very first interview. And you were very new at it. And you were terrible.
Yes.
You were terrible. And you're like, look at me doing my first news interview. Yeah. Hair's everywhere. It's bad. And you're like, and look at me now. And you're a pro. And it was like this pitch of putting in the reps. And it was such a good way to really be humble and put yourself out there to try to change some lives with it. It was a really memorable, fun experience. Sara, so we met for the first time in person at the mastermind, but I had interviewed you previously. How did you get here?
So I started out part-time as well. I was a full-time nurse practitioner practicing. I got pregnant with my second daughter, and I was over going to the hospital when it was dark and getting home when it was dark. And my husband's a lender, and I just saw that there was a better way to do things, and I just felt a calling to do this. So I was actually on the podcast as leaving practicing for a second career and how that all panned out. But in this time, again, I didn't have time to go to all these trainings. So I started leaning in on podcasts, and I would listen to you, Aaron, and I would listen to all the guests and get all the tips when I was, just doing things, working out, whatever that was. And I started to implement those things that I learned, and it actually worked. So I started tagging Real Estate Rockstars on Instagram. And then Aaron and I started chatting. I too heard about the mastermind, and I just, told my husband I'm going to Texas. So I went, and again, life-changing. What I'm most impressed and proud of with this is our culture and the community, and how the vulnerability, when you really get rid of your ego and you really listen to people and listen to their struggles, that's when you really grow. So I think at the end of the day, we all just want to be the best versions of ourselves. And I think this group really pulls that out of each other because we all want to see each other genuinely win. And when that happens, it's just magic. So fast forward, here we're going to our senior year. And I can't wait. And I'm going to bring a bunch of people out from Indiana and show them the Real Estate Rockstars way. It's just amazing.
Back to I was trying to find like the very first interview or message you ever sent me on Instagram, because but my phone is about to break because we have a lot of interactions on here now. So I don't know how long it's going to take me to get there. But my memory was something like, "Hey, I love the podcast." Right? It was like a message of like, "Hey, I love the podcast. It's great." And then you started, you would do stories. And anytime you were out doing something, an open house, you were furnishing, you're like, "Hey, check out this thing that I'm doing." Right? Like, "Hey, when I furnish, I actually like buy the furniture myself and I'm doing it this way." And then you would tag me and you would tag Real Estate Rockstars, like, "Hey," because you hadn't been interviewed yet, but you were like getting tips from the podcast. You're like, "Well, hey, here's some tips that I get." And you would tag us, and it kind of started our interactions that way. And so that started our interaction. And then eventually I said like, "Hey, I should interview you." And then I interviewed you and Matt together at the same time. And then you ended up joining to come out for that first mastermind as well. And then at the first mastermind, I shared a story about how I joined a mastermind with GoBundance. These guys talked me into doing an Ironman. It was this life-changing experience. Finish that story, right? So like, what happened next?
Yeah, I didn't even know what an Ironman was. But you're just on such a high that you're like, "What is he talking? I'll do that." Like I'm subscribing because, you just get there and you feel so good. Like you just feel like kind of on a high that you found a community and you found your people and you have ideas and you're ready to take it home and crush it. And you presented the Ironman and then, you said, "Does anybody want to do this?" And I was like, "Yes." I didn't know what it was. So then we did it with a bunch of Army friends who were these young guys, and Aaron got COVID, and we still did it. So packed up, went to North Carolina, and Real Estate Rockstars, we crushed it. So life changing.
We had Real Estate Rockstars, Ironman, like triathlon jerseys when we were out there. My finger was broken. I had broken like the tendon on my finger to where I had to wear a finger brace that if it slid off, I was going to restart my 6 weeks. It would like the tendon broke to where it was bending my fingers down. And so the only way to heal was like wear a brace. But the Ironman is like a swim and a run. So then I had to put a brace on. I couldn't figure out how to swim. So we were practicing. I put a rubber glove over top of it. And so the whole race, I had a blue rubber glove. Like I'm like Michael Jackson is what we were joking about as I was like running the race and swimming the whole time, but succeeded. I'm back into like 2021 on my DMs. I haven't even got back to where our conversation started yet. So we'll see. So Christina, what's your real estate career like right now? What's going on?
Yeah. So what I'm excited about with both me and Sara, we're both active agents. So we're still out there helping people buy and sell. I do run a team in the Pensacola area, and I'm constantly looking at, I still listen to podcasts all the time to get new ideas. What is working today? What are other markets looking like? And also, as we're interviewing people, hopefully knowing the right questions to ask, because we do it all day. As far as, this open house, what exactly did you say? What happened with this objection? So happy just to jump in there. I have a team of 5. We're tiny but mighty. We sell around 200 homes a year. We do a ton with branding. Branding is one of my superpowers. So if anyone ever has questions on that, I think we've done really well with that.
So my career has, vastly changed. I went to the mastermind, and there was something that Jeremy Few said, and he said that if you're in real estate and you're not investing, then you're just working for a tip. So I really took that to heart and came back home and started to get into flipping. So we started like a luxury flip. I actually closed on one today that we're going to flip. So we're really trying to diversify our portfolio. Also with that, we have started a brokerage powered by Keller Williams. So starting a brokerage, still hustling, still buying and selling, still listing, still momming, still wifing, all the things, but adding to that really this flip, because the flip business, I like to have the control, and I love the creative outlet. Staging has always been my thing, and it's just so great to bet on myself and take myself from the beginning to the end. And then you 10x your income that way. And I just think that is, if you can find the deal, and you can find somebody to do it with, I think you bet on yourself. Matt and I, he locked our house to make the first one happen. And I would never have had that, balls if it wasn't for being around people who talk and do all the same things. And that started with this community. So, activity breeds activity all day long. So thank you.
Yeah. You did a great give back to the group. Like 3 or 4 months ago, you presented on our private member Facebook page, and you went through like, here's our flip. And you showed so many pictures beginning to end, what you guys did to make money on it, like how you did it. And it was such this like gutsy thing. But then now you've turned that into part of your business. Like real estate is very different than it was in 2021. Like when we all met, like real estate was selling like hotcakes, no matter where you were. And it was like, it wasn't an easy business, but it was easier than it is now. I guess the biggest problem back then was competition, but so many people were buying houses. Like it didn't take much to actually go sell and make the stuff happen. But since then, real estate has changed a lot. We've had to do a lot of pivots and a lot of things. And, people have been rebuilding their brands, as they get to do it. I found the very first thing was, July 14th, 2021. I can't see your story anymore, but you just tagged me in your story. And then you did it again 2 days later. And then I reshared it. And then you replied and you said, so cool. I'm such a fan. And I said, thanks for being a fan. Keep crushing it and get on the podcast someday. And you said, day made, thanks for all the content. Literally was on the fence. Do I spend money on a coach? Take Buffini's 100-Day Greatness. And I found your podcast, literally Netflix style binging. Thanks for putting yourself out there for free and spreading greatness. And so that was like, that started this little interaction. So that first little interaction was you just tagged me on something and said, look, and I did this thing too. Right. And then there's probably several months after that where finally you said like, hey, I've done this much volume now. Now I think I can get on the podcast. That's usually my first response to anybody that says like, they reach out and they go, hey, thanks for doing the podcast. I do this. And my first response is always, I can't wait till I get to interview you on the show someday. And they'll say like, I'm a new agent. I'm doing this. I don't know if you guys remember when one of the guys from Austin last year presented, and he was one of Diego's assistants, and he reposted like his first message to me on Instagram. He had worked for Diego, Andres, and he handed me my keys at move-in, and Diego knew he was a podcast fan, but didn't tell him. So he knocked on my door to give me the keys, and I answered the door, and he's like, oh my God. He gives me the keys, plays it cool. And then as soon as he left, he messages me on Instagram. He's like, oh my God, Aaron, I just met you. I'm such a fan of your podcast. Like and I wanted to say something, but I freaked out and I didn't. And my response was, I can't wait to have you on the podcast. Right. And then years later, he was on the podcast and he spoke at our event in Austin last year. And when he reposted that, he reposted the screenshot of the very first time. I was like, I can't wait for you to be on the podcast. And he got interviewed and then a speaker, and it's this whole full circle stuff. We've got lots of fun memories. I wanted to share I got a message from our friend Jennifer today, one of our mastermind members who quit smoking at the mastermind a couple years ago. And she just messaged me this morning. She just bought her ticket. She's coming to join us in March. So she was on the fence and now she's coming back down. Either of you have a fun story, just one more fun story that came from either something you learned from the podcast, a relationship you've made from the podcast, or from the mastermind? Christina, I'll start with you.
Well, Sara and I were in an accountability group for a while together, and that was so special. We did this after the second year. We said, hey, let's bring this home. Let's hold each other accountable. And we met every Monday and did it kind of GoBundance style, where we're looking at different pillars of our life and checking in with each other. And I think that that's so great. There's so many stories, though. There's a girl last year that Nicole, she's constantly posting about how she's just killing it. She stopped drinking. She's feeling great. And it's just so incredible for that to happen from this one mastermind. For mine with my husband, how I say it changed my marriage. So I started doing the Miracle Morning back in 2020 during COVID, and he thought I was crazy. He thought I was nuts, like waking up at 5 a.m. and doing all this stuff. And Hal Elrod spoke at our first mastermind. And oh my goodness, he became obsessed. So now he has the Miracle Morning. He has the Miracle Morning for families. He does ice baths. This is a different man because of this mastermind. And again, he doesn't even do real estate. So that community has been so special and so many doors open just because of that one decision.
Yeah. How about you, Sara?
I mean, there's just so many things. The speakers are just so raw and so seasoned and so experienced. And I think that all of those things I've just translated to my life. But like some of my favorite memories, are like going to karaoke after we all go out, or all going to dinner. And I feel like, being there in person, it's one thing to listen to the podcast, but to spend quality time with your friends afterwards, I feel like those are when the real conversations happen. And that's when the real things happen. I remember I was talking to Elliot about flipping, and he was telling me about some of his experiences. And I was like, wow, I haven't thought about it like that. So it's just like, having these relationships and being able to ask these questions to somebody who's done it and that you trust and that doesn't have an ego. It's just such a great community.
It is. And on top of that, it's not just all real estate all the time. It's almost a retreat. We've done 5Ks. We've done yoga. We've gone out on a river cruise, seen the bats in Austin. And like Sara said, it's in those moments where you're building those real relationships and going deeper and continuing that relationship once you go back home.
And we all share referrals, which I think is really cool. Aaron and I reported a podcast earlier today. As soon as we got off, somebody on the Real Estate Rockstars Facebook page asked for a realtor in Charlotte. And I gave him his email, and I just was really impressed by him. So I think that it's also, networking is everything. So it's just a great way to also build your pipeline.
That's a funny part. I think almost all of our members have gotten a referral from somebody on the thing. I try to tell them that's why the event ends up being free, right? Because there's a pretty good chance that in the next year or two, you're going to get a referral or a deal from somebody. I've got 12 of you guys that are our OGs that have been at since the very first mastermind, and you haven't missed one, and maybe it's down to 10. Maybe we did have one or two guys not make it last year. My brother skipped out. He still made it on the OG page, but he was booking his flight today for this year to come out again. This is exactly what I wanted to accomplish in the chat today. Really, for the listeners out there that have not heard Christina or Sara's, interviews, you can search their name and go back and you'll hear the several times they've been interviewed on the podcast, on our Real Estate Rockstars podcast. By Christina was interviewed by Pat, and then you were interviewed by someone else that helped sub when Maddie was sick.
Elliot.
And then you were interviewed by Elliot. Sara, I think you've been interviewed by me a couple times. I don't know if you got interviewed by anybody else, along the way. But you two are gals that I absolutely entrust this thing to. It's the same thing I said with our mastermind. That actual event last year was the idea that I'm really giving it to the members, right? My intention is to still make sure it happens and provide the capital and the admin to make it happen, but I don't really own it. Right? It's up to the people that have been there since the beginning to say, what do you guys want this to be? And you guys kind of take it and run with it. So wanted to just share to help make our listeners understand over the next few months, really over the next while, right, on the podcast, you're going to hear me or Christina or Sara come on and do these interviews, or some combination of us. And I wanted to make sure you guys had an introduction to who they are. They're going to be doing a fresh spin and take on the questions, especially, and probably a lot more interaction with the different spiel, right? I'm an investor, I'm a business owner, so I have certain interactions that I do with people, and I'm trying to get down to, how it actually works. They're also active agents, so they're going to have different spins and different parts of the way they interact with us. And I think you listeners are going to love having 3 different versions of these interviews as they're going. But we're sticking with that intention that we aren't going to be interviewing people that are going to blow smoke or self-serving. We're only going to interview people that are out there to try to help you learn how to do better real estate. And I know this has sounded like a big mastermind commercial, and I will end with our mastermind commercial at the end. But the reason we share that is it's more of, we wanted to be able to share the story of how we met and how we all became friends. And now we're great friends. We're close, but it all started with a podcast, with an Instagram post. Pretty freaking cool to see what happens, when you go all out there, and then all of us get to say that our lives have been pretty changed with it.
Aaron, I have goosebumps after that.
It's pretty special. It's a pretty special handoff that I'm proud of and excited about, to see how, and I can't wait to listen to the interviews that you guys do, and your different pieces for it. Any final thing you guys want to say before I close this out?
We want to do good interviews so people apply. Send some stuff in so we can talk to you. You can tell us what you're doing in your market, what's working, and you can help others learn like we did.
Yeah.
Or things that aren't working that you've had to pivot. I know in my career, I've so many different things. I think at the end of the day, we all have this entrepreneur spirit, and it's not always just real estate. Like I've turned it into different LLCs where we go and renovate. You love the house, you love the location, but it's the functionality doesn't really make sense for your family. We take down walls and we use AI. So there's all kinds of things that you can do, and you're not stuck in this box. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. And that's the beauty of an abundant mindset and putting yourself around people who also do this kind of thinking. I have said before, Aaron's one of those people who really took the lid off my head. And I have this epiphany that like, I can do that. Like these limiting beliefs got to go. So I just think that all of that has come, and that being around this type of community gives you that confidence that you can see that within yourself, even if you can't. And then eventually you do. And then you double down and you skyrocket, and the sky's the limit for everybody.
We've got a YouTube page for the Real Estate Rockstars. Our website is realestaterockstarsnetwork.com. That's where you can go apply to be a guest. But I like Christina's idea too. The reality is Sara got on there because she started tagging me on Instagram posts. Right. So you can find me on Instagram. There's lots of social media out there, but Instagram tends to be our favorite for interactions. We have the Rockstars page. It's at RE Rockstars. We actually just started that over. We had something like 20 or 25,000 followers, but I felt like the algorithm had been busted and we weren't getting it up. So I deleted it and started again. So now I'm maybe up to like 1,000 or 2,000 again. I want to see how fast we can get back up to 2,000. So please go to at RE Rockstars. Give that a follow. That is just real estate content all the time, clips of our podcast. I'm at Aaron Amuchastegui at Instagram. You've got at This Is Christina Leavenworth or at Sara Denig. So you guys can start tagging them in some of your stuff. Go listen, go reach out to them on because we do get a lot of people that do apply. And if you also send us a message, it's going to be easier to sort through those. So what our promise is when you listen to the podcast, it is all about real estate agents. We're not interviewing investors. We're not interviewing braggers. It is real estate agents that are out there being active. We'll get people that'll apply and they'll send me this big old resume. I'll say, but are you an active agent right now? And if they're not an active agent right now, they're not getting interviewed. So the podcast is going to be that. And then our mastermind that we talk about, that's where we do more than just podcasts, more than just real estate. We do the real estate stuff. That's amazing. But that's also where we try to do this life-changing experience where we get people that do these crazy goals. We get people that have smoked for 20 years and they quit smoking because they want to join our 5K next time. We get all these different kind of life-changing stuff where we've got husbands changing their lives and starting to do Miracle Morning and things like that. So if you do want to come meet us in Austin, it's March 4th to 6th in Austin. We have taken over the South Congress Hotel. We've got every hotel room in the place and the venue for 3 days out there. We still have some tickets left, which is a little bit disheartening for me because last year we sold out by August. And I kept having to tell people, no, more people couldn't go. So this year I got a bigger venue. So we're still stuck and we're maxed out at 100 people, but we got some tickets left. Go to realestaterockstarsmastermind.com and you can buy a ticket or you can send us some more messages about it. It is crazy. I pay $5,000 or $6,000 every time I go to a GoBundance event. We bring the same speakers, the same everything, the same energy to these, and it's $1,000. It doesn't even pay for our venue, right? It is just trying to make sure people have some sort of a buy-in. But if you're thinking about attending any sort of life-changing event this year, if you've thought about Tony Robbins, if you've thought about like mastermind stuff, if you've thought about the big events, ours is different and unique. Ours will be the most affordable one that you'll go to. And I absolutely believe it's that most life-changing thing where when you leave, everybody that's there, you have a bunch of new friends and you're inspired to change your life. So that's realestaterockstarsmastermind.com. The guys, be excited to listen to Christina and Sara, as our new podcast hosts on here. Please show them some love. Please reach out to them, listen, tell your friends to listen as we do it. Christina and Sara. Thank you for taking the torch, and thanks for talking with me today.
You're welcome. We're so excited.
Well, Real Estate Rockstars, thanks for listening.